Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am your host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is your Midday Market Report for Tuesday, November 15, 2022. 15 days left in November. Potential snow back east tomorrow. Holy cow. 'Tis the season, I guess. Thanksgiving just 9-10 days away. I don't know where the time is gone, but it's time for our weekly trip out west with our good friend Ron at Ron A Sports, where we break down some college, some NFL. He gives us some thoughts on where this mayhem is going, whether it's college football and the Final Four, the shakeup, or is it in the NFL? There is no undefeated. He had his eyes on a college game last week that was just absolutely spot on, a little peekaboo, and hats off to Ron. It's our pleasure to introduce him, the one and only Mr. Ron.
Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you today, sir?
I'm wonderful. We do not have snow in Los Angeles area where we've got sunshine. A little chilly at night, but probably not by your standards.
No, there's a little nip in the air. I call it good sleeping weather, the low 30s at night. You got to just crack the heat on so you're not waking up to, a meat locker in the morning. But a little north of us, they're talking about a few inches of snow. We're just going to get rain. We've been getting buckets and buckets the last few weeks. We got enough to, have our lawns look like Augusta, Georgia instead of Augusta, Maine right now. So we're doing very, very well. But we're here. It's that time of the week. We could talk for hours today. We try to condense it into a 30, 40-minute window here. Let's start in college football. Just when it starts to be shaping up where we got a good idea what's going to happen, the Pac-12 throws a big wrench into that. Oregon loses. UCLA, after seeing Oregon loses, lays an egg to Arizona. USC sitting there with one loss there. I don't know if they got enough ammo to get into the Final Four. A Texas versus TCU, where Texas closed at 7.5, and Texas just couldn't move the ball. The TCU defense holds on to upset and win the game outright. Now into the Big 12 championship game, but they have bigger aspirations on their mind. LSU, perfect letdown spot, goes into Arkansas, wins but doesn't cover, as we talk about. Give us your weekend review in college football.
Well, another down time for the Pac-12, but they still have a chance with USC. You look at remaining schedules to see who could jump ahead of some of these other teams. And SC's got a very interesting rest of season. They have pretty much a toss-up game against UCLA, a game against improving Notre Dame that will give them style points, and then probably a Washington or Oregon in a title game. If they sweep all three, they're definitely in contention. TCU, if they sweep all three of their games, they have Baylor this week, and Baylor is a well-coached team that suits up a little bit better than Texas, actually, in the metrics as far as head-to-head. A sneaky Texas Tech team that has been playing better defense than people give them credit for. And then a championship game against flip a coin. It's still to be determined as to who else would be in there. I really think if TCU runs the table, obviously they're going to be in the Final Four. If USC runs the table, they're going to be in the Final Four discussion. Now, Jeff, here's the problem. I don't think either team is going to sweep. And that leaves us with two scenarios. If I'm right that USC loses a game and TCU loses a game, we have 5 teams in the mix, and that's it. We have, obviously, Georgia. We have the winner of the Ohio State-Michigan game for sure. We have the loser of the Ohio State-Michigan game still in the running. We have Tennessee, who will not go to a championship game, but will sit with most likely just one loss. And if TCU loses and if USC loses, their resume is better. And then, unfortunately, for most of us, you have Clemson in the mix. Because if all chaos breaks loose and Clemson wins an ACC title game, and the committee tends to put weight on some title games, and Clemson's path to the title game is dirt easy right now. They basically have to beat a North Carolina team and then whatever else they have coming up right now, which isn't much, South Carolina and the opponent they have this week. Nobody wants to see Clemson back into this at 12-1, but those are your 7 teams that are in the mix.
And if you look at some odds, I think I saw at DraftKings, Tennessee was like minus 220 or 240 to get into the Final Four. Their strength of schedule, the one loss, potential Heisman with Hooker, even though Stroud's still in the lead now. I think the actual chaos would be if Michigan was to beat Ohio State, because then you get the Ohio State, the style points. Look at this offense. You need them in the Final Four. Now, we always talk about the SEC and getting their 2 teams in. Well, it's not going to be Georgia and Bama this year. So it'd be Georgia and Tennessee. Now, if that was the scenario, I hope that they would move Tennessee at least to the 3 spot, so we're not seeing a Georgia-Tennessee 1-4 again in a rematch. I'm afraid. I think I saw 9.5, 10 for next. I think it's next week, the look-ahead line. So let me change gears here. Is that too many points for Ohio State to be favored over Michigan?
Based on my numbers, it's probably correct. I could look at my numbers real quick, but it's probably correct. You know what happens in rivalry games? You don't get full value to begin with. So if you think a team, and it's not always the top 2 teams, but if you have these games at the end of the year, Washington State, or Stanford, Cal, or when one team's better than another, Oregon and Oregon State, even though Oregon State's a bowl team, where the correct line might be, let's say it was a 7 or an 8, you might only get a 5 or a 6, because these rivalry games, they tend to cheapen the points a little because anything can happen in those. So the true line, the game's at Ohio State, if I'm not mistaken. The true line would probably be around 10 for me, 10.5. And I think it can't possibly fall that way based on how Michigan has looked.
So TCU, I mean, they hold the cards. As you said, if they, such a strong performance last week at Texas, now to come back against the Baylor, who laid an egg last weekend, correct?
They played Kansas State. Yeah, Kansas State's a tough team. That's a toss-up game. I think Baylor's doing it more with scheme and coaching than with players. They had a lot of players, 5, 6, 7 drafted in the NFL last year. That's unusual for a Baylor squad. If Alabama gets 7 drafted, they just reload. If Baylor gets 7 drafted, they've got to find some guys that aren't quite ready to play just yet. Tremendous coaching at Baylor. So I don't know if they laid an 8 only because they got blown out 31-3. But Kansas State was back to full health with their quarterback. So you may see Kansas State in the playoffs the way they're playing. So every game is tough in the Big 12. They're all very equally matched at the top, and then you take out Oklahoma and Texas. Oklahoma's 5-5.
If I gave you the crystal ball right now, Ron, and we were sitting here a few weeks in advance, what would your Final Four rankings do you think would be right now?
I would think Ohio State and Georgia would be 1, 2, and 2, 1, depending on how you look at it. Number 3 would probably be Tennessee. And 4, because I think TCU will lose. If TCU doesn't lose, then it's over. Then you got Tennessee, TCU. It's all over. Ohio State, Michigan is basically a play-in game. Otherwise, I think you have Michigan slightly over Clemson, slightly over TCU. I'd rather have Michigan in, even though there may be politics involved. You think that they're doing it solely on metrics and stuff like that, but the committee is well aware if they only put in 2 conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten in, that a lot of other conferences are going to be mad. But the bottom line is Michigan's probably a better team they are a better team than Clemson, and they're probably a better team than the others. So I would say Michigan slightly over Clemson would be my Final Four crystal ball, because I think both USC and TCU will lose a game.
Does USC / Lincoln Riley carry any weight, or is it just Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma just now out west?
Well, they certainly carry weight if they do run the table and play almost their 3 toughest opponents at the end of the year. That carries a lot of weight. Because they win a title game, that might carry weight over a TCU. It might carry weight over a Tennessee, who doesn't get to play in a title game. It certainly eliminates Clemson if USC runs the table, which is understandable because the ACC basically disappointed this year and a lot of quarterback injuries. They carry a lot of weight. They're getting a little bit better defensively. They certainly didn't start out that way. They got an unlucky loss against Utah, 2-point conversion, close game. They certainly got lucky in a 4 turnover edge against Oregon State in the final there. I have a sneaky feeling that they don't survive this week against UCLA.
I think the same there as well. It will be a shootout. That will be a popcorn game. Grab your pom-poms. Whoever has the ball last probably wins that game, Ron.
Yeah. Gonna have to agree with that one. But I think it's certainly intriguing what happens at USC and TCU. I think those are the 2 storylines worth watching. And then Ohio State, Michigan the following week will be interesting, because if that does become a play-in game, you're going to lose one really good team from the Final Four.
Jump over to the NFL, not for long, as we've been talking about this year. For me, the injuries, I do a lot of high stakes fantasy work as well. And to have guys with hamstrings that have been out 6, 7, 8 weeks is just, I've never seen it in my life. Guys getting ready to come back all of a sudden now have turf toe. They're done for the year. Look at their resume. They've been doing this for the same couple of years, a la Michael Thomas. I call him Michael Turf Toe Thomas. What's going on in the Raiders? We talked behind the scenes before we went live here, and my conspiracy theory, you got a Darren Waller who got paid, who had been out a handful of weeks, now goes back onto the IR with Renfro, with a lineman, and you have someone else retire. And then they lose, as I said to you, they lose to Jeff Saturday on Sunday, and people will call him for McDaniel's head on Monday. And it's just business as usual in the 702. How do you take all this?
Well, the bottom line is there's a combination of factors that you need in order to get at and near the top. One of them is certainly injury luck. You saw the Bengals last year virtually have no one go on IR. One guy, and he was basically a backup until the playoffs, and then they lost their second guy. It helps to stay healthy. It also helps to draft well. You can withstand one bad draft. The Raiders have had 4 consecutive bad drafts. I mean, first-round picks are being axed 1 or 2 years after they're selected. That doesn't help them at all. I think what hurts McDaniels is that there's not a lot of passion going on in that organization right now. We interviewed some people on our Friday show with Chris and my friend Ted, and we interviewed one of the players. I'm trying to think which player it was, but he just showed so much passion. It was Jonathan Taylor, actually. We were very lucky to get Jonathan Taylor on the show. We had 5 minutes with him. I mean, you could feel the passion from thousands of miles away on tape, listening to his audio. We didn't have him on video, listening to him on audio. How much passion. I think the passion is missing. I think Derek Carr brings the passion, but there's not a lot of passion behind him in that locker room. And there will be some changes. I expect McDaniel to keep his job. They have to do better job drafting, that's for sure. And maybe it is that Carr's not with the team. We talked a little bit about that. He carries a very high salary. There's 2 or 3 guys, and only 2 or 3 guys right now that are worth first-round picks in the NFL draft from the quarterback position. But the Raiders, unfortunately for them, are in position to get one of them.
We talk about power rankings, your rankings. Probably one of the games of the year happened in Buffalo. A 17-point lead late in the third by the Bills gets evaporated. Questionable coaching, up 10, a gimme field goal. He decides to go for it. A turnover. Probably the catch of the year in my eyes by Justin Jefferson on 4th down. The fumble on the goal line. AFC, I talked all year. You weren't going to be able to go into Buffalo as a number 1 seed and knock them out after a bye and go to the Super Bowl. It wasn't going to happen. Maybe a Patrick Mahomes could do that. After last week and now 3 losses and now back-to-back weeks with Allen having trouble, the elbow, it didn't seem like that was a problem. What's your take on the Bills, number 1, and number 2 on the overall AFC right now?
Okay. I have several comments on the Bills. I do want to say one thing about Minnesota. I think Kirk Cousins is underappreciated. The throws that he made in that game were incredible. We know about Justin Jefferson, but let's give Kirk Cousins credit where credit is due. 2 things bother me with Buffalo. One of them is they're losing too many close games. Over the last 2 years, they're losing a lot of close games. Something's happening in end game situations. If they're not losing close games, they're winning by margin. They're winning easily. So that's something to look at. Number 2, the biggest difference metrically from this year to last year is that they don't have a shutdown pass defense. Their secondary not playing as well as it needs to be. Jordan Poyer has been in and out of the lineup. They don't have White, their true number 1 cornerback. He hasn't played it down this year. He's due to come back in a week or 2. We'll see what level he is. But until we see on the field that they're shutting down opposing quarterbacks, they're not as runaway as I would have thought they would be at the beginning of the year. And a lot of people, I still have them the highest power rated team, but Kansas City's right on their heels in the AFC. I think the fact that Cincinnati got flexed a game away from Sunday night back to the regular Sunday. When I handicapped Cincinnati in the preseason, I thought the ebbs and flows of their season going from 1 primetime game to 5 would be a learning experience for the team. Now they're down a primetime game. They don't have to worry about that as much. I think Cincinnati is a sneaky team to keep an eye on. And Baltimore is really, they're really, really good regular season team. We have to worry about them in the playoffs if they get behind. But Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo, they're now really close together with Cincinnati. And you could say Miami's offense, clicking on all heels, it's got a lot closer in the AFC.
And that was my next step. We have a good one of our fan favorites, TJ here, pumping up Tua here. I had a few questions earlier today about dynasty leagues and Tua versus Fields. And I was like, well, Tua's got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I was like, Justin Fields has got a cloud of dust right now. So Justin reminds me right now of Jalen of last year, Jalen Hurts, and what they do for him. They brought in A.J. Brown. They worked on the offensive line. So I don't know if he's had an amazing month. I don't know if he'll make that next step for next year. But staying in the AFC, the Dolphins, their offense, again, cooking with Crisco. The later we get in the season, the colder we get. They brought in Jeff Wilson, who had a huge game last week. They got that 49er backfield with Mozart and Jeff Wilson now. They got to put a little fear in you, Ron, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. That scheme, that coach is doing wonderful things. And they surrounded Tua with more talent. There's 2 areas they still need to improve on. They either have to incorporate Mike Gesicki into the offense at tight end or upgrade at tight end. And they still have to work on the offensive line. They work a lot on timing and quick throws, and Tua can make quick throws. He can make deep throws. I laughed at people who said he couldn't make the deep throw. I scouted him for 3 years because I've done 30, 40 draft reports and stuff like that. It's just, what do you do best? And what Tua does best, they figured out. And they have Waddle and Hill to stretch the field and the San Francisco backfield. Remember, last year they were 31st or 32nd running the ball. The one thing I wish they had, Brian Flores as defensive coordinator. He was, we all thought, at least I thought that, wow, how could you fire him? He's done wonderful things with the team, but obviously they upgraded offensively, but they miss him on the defensive side of the ball. And so they're still vulnerable defensively, but make no mistake, Miami's in it to win it. I mean, they're a really good team, and they should scare anybody on their schedule.
Patriots coming off a bye week. We know Bill coming off a bye week. This is usually where they really start clicking. Face a Jets team that, the Patriots a couple of weeks ago were okay in New York. This Jets team is a different team now. Again, no Mr. Hall in the backfield, but they haven't missed a beat themselves. As a Patriot, I live in the town. I live in the nation. I don't drink the Kool-Aid. I haven't for 2 decades. I'm not going to start now. If this was Sunday and I think the Pats are 3-point favorites or something, how do you see that game going?
First of all, I'm surprised the line is 3. I made it actually much higher. My power ratings, and maybe I'm wrong because the Jets are obviously playing better than I expected this year. Their defensive numbers are night and day better than last year. But we still have the situation where Zach Wilson is going to have trouble against a Bill Belichick coach defense. The pass percentage for New England is certainly in the top 2 or 3 categories, so they're going to limit him. I think the Jets can run the ball, but they're not perfect at it. They lost their number 1 draft pick due to injury, so he's out there. I think it's going to be a defensive game. I think it's up to the Jets to, do something to disrupt New England's pretty average offense. There'll have to be some wrinkles that New England brings in, but I think from a defensive standpoint, I really don't see the Jets having that much success in the game. So it's a question about, what am I missing? Why is the line only 3? And because Bill Belichick is on the other side with rest, all the things you mentioned, I have to do a deeper dive because this line by public perception shouldn't be 3. It should be 3.5, 4, 4.5, or something like that. So I'm going to do a deeper dive on this, but my first reaction is the line is short. And that New England, they're in a race. They're in last place if you look at the standings right now. So they're obviously got the Jets' attention. Very important game for them. I like the New England side in this game, but I want to do a deeper dive.
We'll jump out to the NFC now. I guess we'll start with last night. The Eagles 11-point favorites, again, coming off a bye. Their primetime Monday night game. They beat up on Minnesota. They shut Justin Jefferson down. In comes the Commanders, Taylor Heineke at the helm. Sluggish, poor play, dumb penalties, kind of going through the motions. Kind of crazy how that game ended with Heineke going to a knee, then a late hit. And then, of course, the lateral, anyone that had the under, the game goes over. I talked to a good friend of mine in Philadelphia, and he's concerned. He's like, we can't stop the run. And if you look at some of the power teams in the NFC, the Dallases of the world, the San Frans of the world, some of these teams, the Giants of the world, that can just run, and run more. If you are a Philly fan, are you now concerned, or you just said it was a bad day, we're going to shake it off, we're 8-1, and we're just moving on?
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of the points. So this is a fascinating discussion item. First, time of possession, which sometimes is meaningless, was certainly meaningful yesterday. I mean, it was 30-7 or something like that. It was just a ridiculous number as far as what was going on. I've said for 2.5 years, and especially last year, I don't understand why teams do not run on Philadelphia. if you look at their stats week in and week out, and I did a deep dive on this because after their bye week, they really changed their offense and they became more of a running team. And Philly did all the right things. And Howie Roseman, the GM, he built this team perfectly. Everything sets up. But nobody tries to run on Philadelphia. There's the fewest amount of carries against the Eagles, I think, last year than any other team in the NFL. And it's not because last year teams got behind. Sometimes the stats get skewed because, of course, they're a dominant team. You don't have time to run the ball. You have to pass the ball. But that wasn't true of Philadelphia last year. Teams just refused to run on them, thinking they were a brick wall against the run. But that, according to my numbers, that's not been the case. And to Ron Rivera's credit, he's been one of the few coaches who said, I'm going to see if I can bully them at the line of scrimmage. And I think he gave a little template for other teams to follow, because for whatever reason, teams are testing their secondary, and they've added 2 really good players to the secondary. One of which, Gardner Johnson, who was signed, August or September, leads the league in interceptions. So why not test the middle of that defense? Because they're giving up a high yards per carry. If you have the type of team that can do that, am I concerned? It's just one loss, and the time of possession was so skewed. We used to see that in Buffalo with the Jim Kelly era, where they scored so fast that their defense was on the field all the time, and eventually they would wear down. No, Philly's a fine team, and they're still very highly rated. Them and San Francisco would be neck and neck in my power ratings. San Francisco probably better than Philly if they're completely healthy. Philly's not going away. They have a pretty complete roster. It just shows that, don't get down on them if they're 13-4 at the end of the year. I mean, 13-4 is a fantastic record in the NFL.
I'm going to go to the Wild Wild West, and this is just the eye test. San Fran coming off a bye. And I was watching them on Sunday night against the Chargers, especially in the red zone. And we call Shanahan one of the offensive geniuses in the game. I think he was having a hard time trying to figure out who to give the ball to. And whether it was CMC, whether it was Debo. And then in comes Elijah Mitchell, who hadn't played since, week 1 or whatever, and got 18 touches. And am I crazy to say that he outthought himself, or is he still trying to tinker with this? Because they got the weapons. If healthy, I think they're the team to beat in the NFC, and I'll get to the next team afterward. But was I crazy to say that? I just think he had too many toys there, and he didn't know what to do with them.
I was watching the end of that game for other reasons because I had the Chargers plus the points, as I always do. I think I even mentioned it on your show. When you get more than 4 points and the Chargers are on the road, it's like stealing money. Yeah. You don't win all the time. There's no such thing as a lock. But with an over 100 sample size, you're going to win 2/3 of the time. And, that's what I call pretty good. So I was watching for other reasons. But I got to tell you, when they were down at the goal line, after the Chargers went 3 and out and they had the ball, 7-yard line. And if they score a touchdown, they're trying to score a touchdown because they don't want to leave it to a field goal. I was thinking, if I were Shanahan, how would I do this? I want to milk the clock. I don't want to score right away. But, I'm thinking the time was more important than getting in the end zone. There were a lot of dynamics going on there. And I don't think he was dissatisfied on first down or even second down. As far as the mouths to feed on the team, pick your poison. Mitchell is a really good running back. You got McCaffrey, who's a 3-tool running back. He can block, he can catch, he can run the ball, he can juke you like crazy. Or you hand off to Debo Samuel and he probably walks into the end zone because you're worried about the other 2. So it's an embarrassment of riches. Maybe it didn't work out to their advantage right then and there. But if you have that many toys, you'll figure it out. Shanahan, endgame situations may not be his best role, but San Francisco scripts their first 15 plays of the game, and nobody does it better. And I think, but don't quote me on this, they also script the first 10 or so plays in the second half as well. And the way his creative mind works, especially offensively, I think nobody's really better at that than starting a game off than he is. Ending a game, maybe you hit something there. It's not as clear cut.
Well, as soon as we're starting to play taps, start to dig the grave, TB12 and Tom says not so fast. He wins 2 weeks ago, and then he goes to Germany and he beats Gino and company there. 2-0 since the divorce. Everyone bringing that up. I had to add that one. Bye week, Fournette gets dinged up, and in comes the rookie with the stiff arm of the year, gets over 100 yards. I've been holding him on one of my spots all year. Do you see this team putting something together? You go back to the first year Tom was there. They were one game over 500 at their bye week. They won the last 4 or 5 games in the bye week. Then they went to Washington. Then they went to the Saints, and then Washington, somewhere else and somewhere else. They won 3 road games and then won the Super Bowl. So do they have the personnel and the mentality to put a run together again this year?
The answer is yes. They have Godwin and Evans. Not too many teams have Godwin and Evans. They're getting more trust in their rookie tight end Otten, which was a void. He's not going to block like Gronkowski. He's not going to have double teams like Gronkowski, but they're getting more trust in him. Their offensive line is still a little bit of an issue. The run game runs hot and cold, but Fournette can push the pile a little bit. He's not going to do that much. And they'll mix in White in there as well. But the bottom line is Atlanta lost a game that they probably thought that they were going to win. New Orleans is obviously Dennis Allen is mismatched as a head coach, and that has fallen apart. Carolina is building for next year and stuff like that. Anybody who tuned into the show Chris and I did last Tuesday knows that we endorsed taking Tampa Bay to win the division. I think it was minus 215 or something at the time. I looked around and I said, okay, I've done that. What about just to make the playoffs? What is that? Just in case a 9-8 team makes the playoffs, although probably it's only going to be one team there. And it was even better odds just to make the playoffs at one of the sites. So I fully endorse Tampa Bay. I think they're capable of winning 9 or 10 games. I think they're capable of playing better defense with a defensive-minded coach. They'll have 1 or 2 pitfalls along the way, but I think that comeback against the Rams put them in an unbelievable mindset. And the competition that they have left, it's just not good enough in that division.
And I just remembered, tough getting old here. One at Washington as 11-point favorites. They were 2.5-point underdogs in New Orleans, and then they went to Green Bay and won that game to get to the Super Bowl there. The second part of the older generation, big win for the Green Bay Packers. They stop a 5-game skid. I thought that was the only side that you could have played there. Dallas coming off a bye week. We have that, similar saying on a lot of these teams coming off bye weeks where you think they're got 10 days to get ready, an extra week to get rested and revved up. And some of these guys threw out clunkers. But, down 14, they make the comeback. Then in overtime, again, a coaching blunder in my eyes with McCarthy. If you knew you were going for it on 4th down, you got it at 3rd and 4, hand the ball to Pollard or that other guy, whatever his name was, get yourself 2 yards, make it 4th and 2 instead of 4th and 4. Rodgers and company come down. It was the breakout game for Christian Watson. Thoughts of the Packers moving on, and they got to, just turn around and face Henry and the Titans on Thursday.
Yeah, I'm not as bullish on the Packers because I don't think they can defend the run either. And I think they've shown a history of getting burned by mobile quarterbacks. So I think down the road, they probably dug themselves too big a hole. It's not like Tampa where the rest of the division is garbage. And Minnesota is going to win the division, barring a catastrophe. So now they're fighting for playoff status. Are they about 4-6 somewhere in that area? I don't even know what their record is.
Actually, They won their first 2 games. I think they're 3-5. That's my guess.
Okay. So they're somewhere in that area, 3-5, 3-6, and stuff like that. They have to get to 9 probably to get to tiebreakers because a lot of the NFC East teams are looking good. Washington's 5-5. The Giants are certainly on pace to win 9 or more games. Dallas is probably still going to win more games than Green Bay. So Green Bay still faces an uphill battle. I still think Watson is not a polished receiver. He's fast. He had a breakout game, but he's not a polished receiver. And I think their run defense is still a little bit soft in crunch time. I think they're going to come up short. I think they can play better. I didn't like some of Rodgers' comments after the game. It was a different mindset than Brady's comments after the game. Rodgers was not willing to fully endorse his wide receiver crew. I think there'll be spots to fade them down the road.
I'll give you the soft lob here in your neck of the woods in LA. A Rams team that, hey, listen, you won the Super Bowl last year. There's 29 other teams, or how many other teams there are that just wish they were where you were. Okay, it has not been a good year. You brought over Allen Robinson. It hasn't worked out. You can't run the ball. You tried to trade Akers. No one took him. That hasn't worked out. Cooper Kupp now on the shelf for at least 4 weeks. I hear high ankle sprain, and it's at least 4 weeks. These guys don't come back. At this point, I don't see any reason why to rush back. You lose to Arizona last week. What's the temperature? What's the thoughts? And I was going back and forth with my Detroit guy before we came on. He's telling me that Detroit's got your first round pick, and they said he could get at least a top 5, if not a top 3 pick. So what's going on in LA, Ron?
What's the play or the movie where it was whatever Lola wants, Lola gets, that old time, damn Yankees? I mean, they sold their soul last year with Von Miller, with Odell Beckham and whatever. If they don't add any of those players, they're 9-8 last year. And so starting this year, they were only going to be a 9-8 team. They didn't have any of those players. The only thing they could do is if they were in contention, they would sell their soul again and give up some more picks, which they tried to do for another edge rusher. But they don't have any first round picks. Their offensive line is not very good. They're not incorporating Allen Robinson into the mix enough. Stafford had a procedure done before the year that kind of went under the radar. They can't run the ball. They got Aaron Donald. They got Jalen Ramsey, but they have a bunch of other people that aren't performing up to standards that were 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round picks because of their draft capital or lack thereof. I see this team as last place. Where else can you see them right now?
I agree 100%. But, you got the Super Bowl. God bless you guys. You can't ask for any more. We always talk about the Super Bowl hangover. There was a lot more to, as you just said, at best you were going to be 9-8. You opened up against the Bills. You could kind of get a good litmus test. You played a good first half and then 21-0, I think, Bills in the second half there. And you just kind of not gone through the motions. It's just, I'm watching that offense, and you can't run the ball, and it's more to an offense than Cooper Kupp for 20 looks and 17 catches and an occasional Higbee catch. So enjoy that Super Bowl there. I want to close, and I want to throw you the ball here. You had talked off the air. Your thoughts about potentially the NCAA playoffs and what you would do, what you see, and what you're thinking.
Well, I think we mentioned that my crystal ball would be that it would be hopefully not Clemson, but it would be between Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee, Georgia, and possibly TCU or USC. If they run the table, they're in. But if they don't run the table, I don't know if the committee has the guts for that. Down the road, I wish they would have gone to an 8-team playoff. I still don't like the 12-team playoff. I think it's just you're going to let in some teams that are going to be 20-point underdogs to the Georgias and Alabamas of the world, and we don't need that in the college. It cheapens the game. But my thoughts really are I would this week. Do not be surprised if either TCU and or USC loses. I really think one of those two will happen, if not both. I haven't done as much work on the NCAA at this point as I did last week when we talked. There were other things that came up, so I concentrated on the NFL a little bit more. I still have plenty of time to do the NCAA, but I think that one of those two teams, I think UCLA is suited to play USC tough, and I think Baylor is suited to play TCU tough.
I was just scrolling quickly down the odds page, and right now USC computer model 2.5 with a 74.5. It's down to 1 or 1.5 and a 75.5. And the other game that you were just talking about, TCU 2.5 with a 57, now 2.5 with a 57/58.
Yeah. So on paper, they're going to look like toss-up games. TCU's met every challenge, and their metrics look really good. I think it's going to be an interesting game. I think Baylor can hang with them. We'll see. TCU hasn't really done anything wrong, but I just have that feeling that the teams match up very well. I'm not saying outright win automatically for Baylor, but I put it in the toss-up category.
If I had to pick a winner, I thought obviously TCU was going to lose last week to Texas. I was wrong there. But on paper, I think UCLA gets it done this week. I really do. I like the spot for Chip Kelly here. I think that will be a shootout. I could even see Baylor, as you talked about Kansas State, Martinez getting healthy and really not playing well against them. Maybe even a little peekaboo there, Ron, and they're getting their eyes set on TCU this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting in terms of how many shots does TCU take before they play a less than perfect game, defensively, where somebody gets open or somebody gets there. They're not a team like a Alabama for most years and a Georgia and Ohio State that can just play their below average game and win. They're going to have to play an above average game to win. And to TCU's credit, they've done that all season long.
Ron, it's always a pleasure. The scroller's been working the whole time at Ron A Sports on Twitter. Please, thank you. Tell the boys out west we said hello. Tell Vegas Chris we said hello. And look forward to hopefully next Tuesday catching back up with you.
Yeah, we'll have some more rivalry games to talk about, and it's going to shake down even more. A couple of ideas for next week. We're going to find out who's the pretenders and who's the contenders in the NFL. What teams shut it down. I was almost ready to talk about it this week. Too early. Everybody's still in the race. We'll see in a week or two. But thanks again. Talk to you next week.
All right, Ron. Have a great day. And I know you got a show in 11 minutes. Tell the boys I said hello. Take care. That's Ron at A Sports. Please go follow him. His work is impeccable. If you go to our website, www.eastcoastsportsinvestors.com, and you pause in about 6 seconds, you can add your email to us, and you will be able to download his 96-page preseason NFL breakdown on every team. And it actually still stuff I'm reading on a week-to-week basis, even in week 10 and 11 right now. So, again, we can't thank him enough. All the watchers, listeners, thank you. If you're not following us, please do. You can jump over to our YouTube station at East Coast Sports Investors. Just hit the subscribe button. It's free. That's all. It's free. Run over to Twitch, same place, TikTok, wherever it is. In exactly 10 minutes, myself and Southside Riley will get you caught up with the closing bell. We are on a heater on the ECSI VIP. Start the week 1-0. We're 10-1 in our last 11. I had 3 desk plays that I talked about on the closing bell last night with Riley. All came in. All on my desk. I hope some of you guys cashed out. So from myself, Jeff Dawson at DC Sports Invest, from Ron at Ron A Sports, we wish everyone a blessed day, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes.